G'day folks, welcome to part 2 of the 3SGE teardown come autopsy. It's a pretty straightforward system with the twin cams. There's no cheater gears in between. Obviously it's the belt driving both cams at once, unlike the 3S FE where the cams are closer together and you've got two scissor gears or cheater gears that drive one clockwise and one anti-clockwise. In this case they both go the same direction, which should be clockwise shaft end or belt end. The lobes don't look particularly bad. I mean, I'm not an expert on cams, but they're not ground up. I'll have to pull some of these caps off and just see what the journals look like, because remember, this engine was run to the point where the oil light was coming on and it was making horrible noises, so it could get interesting. Engine hasn't been run with coolant for a while. It's very rusty, so all these Welch plugs will need to be knocked out and redone if this head was to be reused. But again, for the price of getting a head reconditioned and all that sort of stuff, I could basically get a black top or red top Beams engine and drop that in instead. So it's a bit of a toss-up between putting this head on the FE block, which is a big risk, or just getting a Beams engine. So more than likely this will end up as a spare parts thing rather than a FE to GE conversion, because, well, the GE still has a cast iron crank instead of a forged one, and likewise the bearings and the wrist pins and everything aren't all that crash hot. So I'm kind of abandoning that idea and going more with the idea of just getting a half cut from Japan and doing a full conversion to a 3SGE Beams engine, or somebody suggested, I think it's a 5A series or something like that. There's another series of engine which can be dropped into the RAV4 with a good performance gain but still good reliability. I'm not going to go turbocharge or anything like that. I don't drive like a Leadfoot, so I don't really need a turbo, but I would like a bit of extra grunt. And these engines do put out a bit of extra grunt compared with the FE series. Just a shame this one's dead. Very dead. If I had a starter and all the gear, I'd actually have tried to start it, but it's yeah, it's kind of nasty. Okay, well, that's the front stripped down. An interesting thing to note, unlike the FE series, you can actually unbolt the oil pump straight off the front of it. The FEs, I believe you have to take this whole front casting off, which means dropping the sump and everything. At least that's what I found online anyway. But in this case, unless the housing itself is scored out, you could probably just replace this pump assembly here and be done with it. It'd probably be a good idea to replace the whole lot if you were doing a full rebuild, but realistically, if you were having lower oil pressure issues, sort of like Betty's engine where the oil pressure is a bit on the low side but still within spec, it'd be nice if you could just unbolt that and replace it. I don't believe I can. I couldn't see any of these extra bolts around the front cover on her engine, so it's just, yeah, it's one of those things. Cost cutting. The FE series is like an economy model. This is a performance model. As I said before, the FE has cast everything. This is all pretty much forged. Let's also take the drift grade filter with a magnetic thingamajig in it and cut it open. Let's see what debris has gone through it before the oil pump quit picking up oil. Okay, well, the filter shows years of neglect. Like, it hadn't been changed in a while, and there's a lot of sludge sort of settled in the bottom of it. And even though I did cut it open with a slitting wheel on a grinder, the dust that's actually crammed into the pleats is not that of grinding dust. You can see the little white specks are actually shiny bits of metal, and there's a lot of it all the way through this. They're ground up bits of steel or bearing metal, white metal. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The thing's a mess. Oh, there's the magnet on the inside there, suspended in the middle. So it's a magnetic filter. Whether or not there's much advantage to that, I don't know, but I've certainly never seen one before. Yeah. Anyway, that one can go in the rubbish bin. Yuck. Certainly shows signs of engine self-destruction. That's my analysis on that one. Also stag paste all over this thing. Stag paste on everything, really. I don't know if they've had the head off it before, but even these housings here have stag paste on them. The cooling housings. Even the front main seal, they've slathered this hard setting stag paste on it. And yes, it is actually embedded in the filter plates as well. Quite a bit of it. They've slathered it on the front main seal and basically everything they've worked on. I don't know if they've separated the box before, but everything seems to have this nasty hard setting stag paste all over it, and once it sets hard and then cracks from thermal expansion, you still get oil leaks. You need you basically need Loctite Copper Max or Blue Max for stuff like this. Copper Max is the best for seal, rocker covers and water pumps and things like that, and the seal itself, as long as you just oil it a little bit, wipe a bit of engine oil on it, you shouldn't have to cover it with shit like that. Somebody's probably tried with the best intentions to seal this engine up a bit better than they thought they would, but it seems to have backfired because it's covered in oil, long-term oil leaks and other issues. Why it spun the bearing originally, quite possibly because it had been sitting for so long. Also quite possible that it was bad to begin with, or going bad to begin with, because of a lack of maintenance, really. Lack of oil change particularly. So the top end's a mess. Oh well, let's get on with it and get the head off. As they say, off with its head. Definitely off with its head. Yes, this engine's definitely been subjected to some subnormal workmanship, or substandard workmanship. All the other bolts came free pretty good. They were bloody tight, which they should be. That one there, someone's already taken the liberty of camming it out and just stripping it. So obviously they went to take the head off for some reason and gave up part way through, or they stripped it when they were putting it back in. They just ran it in hard and just stripped it out. So yeah, out comes the drill again. I'm gonna have to drill the head off it and yeah, wind the stud out afterwards. It's the last one, luckily. It's the only one. But yeah, they took the liberty of stripping it so bad my Allen wrenches just don't bite anymore. Like, they barely bite and then they slip. Whereas the other ones, I can put the extension bar and everything on and crack them free, no problems. But that one, someone's already messed it up. Oh well, it's just one of those things. They probably ran them in with a rattle gun, more than likely, and then the Allen driver slipped and just cammed the crap out of it, ripped the crap out of the head. Okay, well, cylinder head wise, the thing looks pretty good. No major collision damage or anything like that. I mean, I can see, I wonder if this is the bad cylinder. I can see marks where the valves have touched the piston. I mean, I haven't moved the crankshaft since I took the head off, so rattling the camshaft pulleys off wouldn't have opened the valves far enough to hit that piston. I'd say, that might be the bad cylinder. Might turn out to be the bad cylinder. But again, it's not too bad. The gasket's really crusty, and I can see signs of washing and corrosion in that bore and around the top of this one here. No, this one. There's a lot of rust staining and discoloration, so I wonder if they've had a head gasket problem in the past. And this gasket appears to have split in two. Almost. Oh no, I think it's just a coating that's left on the deck. Yeah. I think it's one layer of the gasket that's been left behind. It's well and truly stuck. Yeah. There's a lot of debris stuck in the cooling galleries because of the neglecting to use coolant. And there's no obvious blows between cylinders, maybe just into the from the cooling jacket into the cylinder. Yeah, what a mess. I'll have to send it off to get it reconditioned. This head's an absolute mess. Get new Welch plugs, new everything fitted to it. But again, I'm not sure if I'll use this head or if I'll find a proper engine. Well, I'm almost positive it's better just to find another engine, but this head would be a good spare. I don't know if I'd bother rebuilding it just yet, but it can go into storage unless anyone else needs one, in which case I'll probably sell it. Yeah, but the bores themselves don't look too crash hot, particularly that one there. You can see that it's old rust pitting, but it's rough. It's been sitting with moisture and water in the bore for a while. Obviously had a head gasket problem, or maybe that there's been leaching through. It's one of the cooling galleries, and it's been leaking coolant into one of the cylinders, or more. I'll wait until I can turn the crankshaft over and then lower these pistons and see what that's like. Yeah, there's the bolt that I drilled the head off. Get a nice sharp snap as the head lets go, and that's about it. You can just spin the thing out by hand. Thanks to the guy who cammed it out and wrecked it. Oh well, that was easy enough to get out though. It's nothing I haven't done before. Yeah, that bore there has had similar issues. It's not happy. That's number 2. Yeah. There's a lot of rust pitting in there. It's deep too. This thing sat with a blown head gasket for a while, or been run for it with a blown head gasket for a while, but it doesn't look like... It looks like they've obviously thrown a new head gasket on it and everything, and then cammed or stripped that bolt head out in the process and just left it. Whoever did it didn't want to take it apart again because of that bolt. That head's going to have to be fully stripped and tanked to get rid of all the metal shavings and shit that I left in it. That's kind of unavoidable. I mean, the block itself's just full of rust and gunk. What a mess. Mind you, the gasket does block off all but a certain part of those cooling galleries. It doesn't help though. Should always run coolant. Don't run straight water, or that kind of nastiness happens. Yuck. Alright, well, I guess I'd better... I'm going to strip the auto off this, and plug it up, take it outside, maybe give it a pressure wash, and then we'll flip this baby upside down and take the bottom off it. I'll drag my engine stand in here for that, and should be all happy as Larry. We gotta get to the bottom of this and work out what went wrong, at least where it went wrong. I know what went wrong. Bearing spun, but we'll yeah, have a look at the carnage and then get rid of the rest of it. I'm not going to bother keeping the block. The crank, if the crank isn't too badly scored, it might be grindable. Being a forged crank, it's kind of worth keeping, but again, with the availability of Japanese import stuff, it's not really worth rebuilding one of these. Not unless you can get the parts really cheap and the labour really cheap, but again, I've got to outsource to shops that I've never even used before, so I ain't going to get mates rates on getting the head or the crank redone. Not that I'd use this particular core unit, I'd get another one done, but yeah, it's not worth it. Not worth it. Okay, that's the engine block separated from the transmission. Obviously being an automatic transmission, as I've said before in earlier videos, it's not a manual. That's the torque converter that will have to come off the drive plate or flex plate. You can see there's several bolts, it's like 2, 4, 6 bolts holding it on. I'm going to have to index that around to, I think, the bottom or somewhere, and get in there and undo them. Unless I can... no, I can't take that backing plate off. Either way, I'll find out when I hoist the engine up. I'm going to have to take it off before I can put it on the stand. If I use the stand. I might just hoist it up high enough to put it on blocks like this and work on it there. But yeah, that's auto trans. That's the input shaft. That remains stationary and keeps the stator still inside the torque converter. And down inside there, that drive dog runs the oil pump. Those slots engage in the oil pump and actually drive that, as you would have seen on the Commodore automatic transmission tear down the what was it, 4L60E. That tear down showed you the oil pump drive that sits behind this housing. This one will be very similar. It's either a vane pump or a gear pump. This might be a gear pump, and fluid from the pump comes out through here and fills the torque converter, which is basically like a fluid clutch to a degree. It's the reason why the engine can keep spinning while you're, say, at standstill in first gear. The engine will keep running. You don't have to have a clutch or anything like that, because all it's doing is, well, the gearbox is locked up, but the torque converter is allowing slip through the fluid, and it's just turning it into heat. It's the best way to treat an auto. Don't throw it into neutral every time you come to the lights, because then all the gear sets are rotating, all the clutches are rubbing against each other, the bands are rubbing against the drums, and you wear things out. It's something I've heard a long time ago, and Alex just reminded me the other night. He'd been having a discussion with somebody about leaving autos in gear or in neutral. The best thing to do is in neutral, is in gear at the traffic lights or when you're at a standstill, because the clutches are locked together, nothing's rubbing against each other. It's just fluid resistance in the torque converter that the auto cooler is designed to dissipate. It's just creating better heat, whereas if you put it in neutral and leave it idling, the gear sets are all spinning away, but nothing's actually engaged. So you've got the bands just lightly rubbing on the drums, you've got the clutches just lightly rubbing together, and it's not that good for it. You start wearing stuff out prematurely. So you might be able to take your foot off the brake a bit, or just put the park brake on and sit there, but that's a luxury you pay for in the form of a worn out auto prematurely. You prematurely kill your auto, but you might have the well, you might not be braking against the auto if you shift into neutral before you even come to a stop. That's still just as bad, if not worse. Autos best just left in gear. Warm the engine up, put it in drive, keep it in drive till you get there, unless you absolutely have to change gear or take it out of gear. Anyway, that's enough about autos. This is about engines. I'm going to try and get that torque converter off and get the engine raised up and start stripping it down. There we go. All the main drive parts from the crankshaft to the transmission are all assembled. Not tightly, but they're there. These big holes had M10 fine thread bolts in them, very well Loctited, but again, rattle gun makes short work of that stuff. That bolts straight to the crankshaft on this end. This spigot here aligns or fits into the centre of the crankshaft. There's a machined step in it that sits in and keeps everything completely concentric. Again, the flex disc or flex plate, drive plate if you want to call it that, centres on a boss on the crankshaft as well, so everything's lined up really well. And yeah, this transmits drive to the torque converter and also allows for a bit of deflection because it's flexible. It's a very thin sheet metal pressing that has a ring gear welded to it. It's not actually a flywheel, it's a drive plate. The mass of the torque converter acts as a flywheel because that's always spinning at engine RPM. The outer body of the torque converter doesn't change RPM independent of the engine, unless there's something wrong, like these bolts break or come loose because somebody didn't tighten them and Loctite them. Yeah, the torque converter body always spins at engine RPM, so does the oil pump in the auto and all that stuff. So that's fully seated in, driving the oil pump. Now all I need is something to either use it on or something to, well, basically donate it to. It's a good auto, it still works, there's nothing wrong with it. I'd hate to have to tear it apart, but you know me, if it doesn't move in a hurry, it'll end up in pieces. Oh dear, I guess there was a bit of engine oil left in there. Yeah, I've got the, that's where the flex disc, or drive plate, centres on. And that's where the torque converter centres in that centre boss there. So everything's completely aligned for minimal, if any, vibration. And there's some very cooked looking oil slowly leaking out onto the floor. Oh well, I better stand it back up and yeah, look at hoisting it up and draining any residual oil, though now it's all sort of distributed over everything, so this thing's going to be a mess.